Good afternoon, everyone. Our topic for today is about Pavlov's classical conditioning. So, Pavlov's classical conditioning is a fundamental theory in behavioral psychology that explains how organisms learn through associations. It highlights the process by which a neutral stimulus can elicit a conditioned response when paired with an unconditioned stimulus. The theory was developed by Ivan Pavlov, a Russian physiologist in the early 20th century. His groundbreaking work began around 1890. So let's discuss first the words that we will encounter during this discussion. So, there are processes of classical conditioning. First is the neutral stimulus or the NS. It is a stimulus that initially does not elicit any physical response. For example, is the bell before it is paired with food. Second is the unconditioned stimulus or the US. It is a stimulus that naturally and automatically triggers a response. Example is the food which causes salivation. Third is the unconditioned response or the UR. It is the natural response to the unconditioned stimulus. For example is the salivation in response to food. Fourth is the conditioned stimulus or the CS. The previously neutral stimulus that after being paired with the unconditioned stimulus comes to elicit a conditioned response. Example is the bell after being associated with the food. And the last one is the conditioned response or the CR. It is the learned response to the conditioned stimulus. Example is the salivation in response to the bell. So what is the theory all about? Pavlov's classical conditioning explains how a previously neutral stimulus can become associated with a meaningful stimulus, leading to a learned response. One day, napansin ni Pavlov na tuwing binibigyan ng pagkain ng technician yung aso at kasabay ng pagpapatugtog ng bell, nagsasalivate yung aso. So, gustong malaman ni Pavlov kung saan ba nagsasalivate yung aso, kung dahil doon sa technician mismo na nagbibigay sa kanya ng pagkain or dahil doon sa pagkain or dahil doon sa bell. So nagsimula siya ng experiment and during the experiment, binigyan niya ng pagkain yung aso, yung napagkain na. And then, binigyan niya ulit ng pagkain yung aso na kasabay ng pag-bell. And then, inulit-ulit niya ito ng how many times. And then, pagkatapos ay inalis niya yung pagkain at yung bell lang ang pinanonog niya. And napansin niya na without the presence of the food, nagsasalivate pa rin yung aso. So Pavlov concluded that if a new stimulus was present when the day was given food, that the stimulus became associated with food and the dog knows salivation on its own. So his experiment, it demonstrates that learning can occur through associations between different stimuli. This theory has profound implications for understanding behavior in the learning processes in both animals and humans.
To illustrate Pavlov's classical conditioning, consider the example of a student learning to associate the sound of a school bell with the end of class. Initially, the bell is a neutral stimulus that doesn't elicit any specific response. However, after several instances of the bell ringing, which is neutral stimulus, followed by dismissal, which is unconditioned stimulus, the student begins to feel a sense of relief and excitement, which is the conditioned response whenever they hear the bell. This demonstrates how connections are formed with stimuli through repeated readings. Pavlov's classical conditioning has significant implications in the educational setting. Teachers can use this theory to create a positive learning environment. For example, a specific song or sound could be played at the beginning of class, which is the neutral stimulus, which, when paired with enjoyable activities like games or engaging discussions, which is unconditioned stimulus, can lead to students feeling excited and for and focus whenever they hear that sound in the picture, which is the conditioned response. Additionally, this theory can be applied to teaching by creating positive association in the classroom. For instance, teachers can use specific sounds, colors, or phrases to signal transitions or activities. By consistently pairing these cues with enjoyable or rewarding experiences, students can develop positive feelings towards learning and classroom activities. This approach can enhance motivation and engagement, making students more excited about participating in lessons. In summary, Pavlov's classical conditioning theory reveals how learning occurs through the association of stimuli. Developed by Ivan Pavlov, this theory demonstrates that a neutral stimulus, when paired repeatedly with an conditioned stimulus, can elicit a conditioned response. The practical application of this theory in teaching highlights its relevance in creating positive learning experiences and managing classroom behavior. Understanding this theory not only enhances our grasp of behavioral psychology but also equips educators with tools to improve teaching methods and student engagement. That's all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our topic for today is Thorndike's connectionism. Thorndike's connectionism is an important theory in educational psychology which was developed by Edward Thorndike, an American psychologist and one of the pioneers of educational psychology in the early 20th century. He is known for his work on the loss of learning, which emphasizes the role of stimulus-response connection in the learning process. When we say connectionism, it is a learning theory that explains how creators form connection between stimuli and response through trial and error. When we say stimuli or stimulus, it is an event or object that prompts reaction, while response, on the other hand, is the outcome to that stimuli. Thorndike connectionism is a theory in educational psychology that explains learning as the formation of connection between the stimuli and responses. Thorndike believed that when an action leads to a satisfying result, the connection between the action and the result becomes stronger, making it more likely to be repeated and happen again. On the other hand, actions with unsatisfying results are less likely to be repeated. This process is governed by the 3 laws of learning and is to be reported by Mr. Cantuccio.
So for the continuation of Thorndike's 3 laws of learning, number 1 is the law of readiness. Learning occurs when individuals are prepared and motivated to act. Readiness enables effective learning. So dito, ang student ay matututo lamang kung sila ay prepared sa mga gawain, sa lessons, gano'n. Number 2 is the law of exercise. Practices strengthens the connection between action and their outcomes. By emphasizing the importance of repetition, it is also referred to as the law of use. Connections or bonds made in the brain are strengthened if the person exercises his brain. And law of disuse, if the brain is not used or does not perform regular exercise, then the connection or bonds are weakened or loosened. So the law of exercise, dito naman yung students ay pinapractice nila na ma-strengthen yung mind nila sa paggamit sa lessons. Kung hindi nila magamit ng mabuti, meron na tinatawag na law of disuse. Yung if the brain is not used or does not perform regular exercise, then the connection or bonds are weakened or loosened. Next is laws of learning to the teaching method. First is teachers should ensure that students are mentally and emotionally prepared before introducing new concepts. So dito naman, bago magkakaroon tayo ng grade test, post test, mga ganun, parang nire-ready natin ang student natin sa kung ano yung mga lesson. And meron tayo mga objectives na kailangan as teacher na dapat yun yung goal natin sa student natin. Next is repetition and practice should be incorporated into lesson plans to reinforce learning. So dito naman, as teacher, yung mga practices should be incorporated into lesson plans. So meron tayo mga ginagawang lesson plan. Kung ano yung mga flow of teaching natin sa student. Next is positive reinforcement such as praise and rewards, abstract and desired behaviors and skills. So dito naman yung mga connection natin sa student natin, yung positive communication natin, yung mga nabibigay tayo ng mga rewards sa kanila kung mga nagawa nila tama. Next is teaching strategies should provide satisfying learning experiences to maintain student motivation and engagement. So next is educators should minimize punitive measures. They have limited effectiveness in altering behavior to the students. So tayo as a teacher, kailangan natin i-minimize yung mga punishment na ibinibigay natin sa isang student. Dahil hindi naman nakaka-apekto yung punishment sa kung ano yung mga gagawin ng bata o ginagawa nila. Next is the lesson in a capsule. Edward Thorndike's three laws of learning, the readiness, exercise, and effect, highlight the importance of preparation, practice, and positive reinforcement in the learning process. These laws serve as foundational principles for creating effective teaching strategies, ensuring that students are mentally prepared, consistently practicing, and motivated through satisfying learning experiences. By applying these principles, educators can foster an environment conducive to meaningful and lasting learning. So ito, the three laws of Thorndike's in learning, nakaka-apekto to sa kung ano yung mga classroom environment natin, yung mga student natin, yung mga teachers, kung ano na mga ginagawa, para yung isang lesson ay maging maganda at matutunan ng student.
Once again, good day, and now we are going to discuss all about the Skinner's operant conditioning. So there are many theories today that are grounded on behaviorism. Theories that describe significant changes to human behavior. For instance, have you ever noticed how you tend to take actions that get you to good results and avoid those that lead to bad ones? Think about it. Probably you keep going back to your favorite topic because you make the best latte or milk tea, right? Or maybe avoid a certain street because you always get stuck in traffic there. So today's natural tendency to repeat behavior with positive outcomes and avoid those with negative ones is at the heart of the operant conditioning theory. So in this lesson, we are going to learn the important principles of operant conditioning theory and how it is applied in the practice of teaching. So let us start with knowing who proposed the theory. So the proponent of operant conditioning is Bruce Frederick Skinner. He was born on March 20, 1904 and died August 80 in 1990. He is an American psychologist who is known for his impact on behaviorism. And this theory of ESC is proposed in 1930s, which is early 20th century, which is based on this experiment, Skinner's box. So for short information about Skinner's box is the device that modified the animal's behavior. In that experiment, Skinner put a rat in a box with a lever, a hole, and a closed chamber. So if the lever was pushed, the chamber opened and it dispensed food. So unconscious to this mechanism, the rat accidentally pushed the lever and the food was dispensed. So at the end of the experiment, the rat learned that continuously pushing the lever would open the food dispenser. So from this experiment, like what I've said, is Skinner come up with this theory, which is operant conditioning theory, which in a nutshell is that we learn by associating our actions identified by Skinner. We have the reinforcement, schedule of reinforcement, and the punishment. The reinforcement in Tagalog is pangmalakas. And in the context of the theory, it is something that strengthens the behavior. And it is divided into two types. We have the positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement refers to giving or adding the pleasant stimulus to increase the response or the behavior. You can think of it as giving a reward for doing good or for you to do good. For example, the mother promises his son a new cell phone if he got 5 grades in mathematics. So the pleasant stimulus added by the mother is the cell phone, and that stimulus increases the response of his son to study well. While on the other hand, the negative reinforcement is all about taking away something unpleasant to encourage desired behavior. It is not a punishment, but a reward. In what sense? So let's have an example. The teacher announces that the teacher announces that the students that get perfect score in the long quiz will be exempted in the periodical exam. So removing the periodical exam is the unpleasant stimulus, and it is not a punishment but a reward in a way that if realizing it is parang reward siya for students na we work hard and study well. And next is the schedule of reinforcement. When we say schedule, we know that it refers to time. In the context of the theory, when will the reinforcement be given? So we have 3 schedules, types of schedule: the continuous schedule, intermittent schedule, and religious schedule. When we say continuous schedule, from the word itself, its reinforcement is given every time the desired response is given. So you can think of a vending machine na if you put in money, you get your snack immediately. So, and next is intermittent schedule, which is the opposite of continuous, wherein the reinforcement is given regularly. And the ratio schedule naman is reinforcement given depending on the number of correct responses or the rate of responding. For example, a dog gets a treat every 5 times it sits on command. So, nakuha niya yung reward niya, which is the reinforcement after a number of responses. And lastly, the last of the key points is the punishment. Punishment is any consequences that decreases the likelihood of the behavior happening again. And it is also divided into 2 types, which is the positive punishment and negative punishment. When we say positive punishment, it is an addition of an unpleasant stimulus to decrease the behavior. You can also think of it as giving a punishment for being wrong. For example, the teacher gives student A and student B are talking while the teacher is discussing. So as a punishment, she gives extra homework to student A and student B. So yung extra homework is the punishment, and that punishment is extra homework is the unpleasant stimulus, and that would make less likely the students to talk during class again. And negative punishment is, you can think of it as taking something enjoyable to discourage the unwanted behavior. For example, a student is taken away from their favorite activity, which is recess, because they weren't able to complete their task or work. So yung recess, yung enjoyable, and the teacher removed it to decrease the behavior, unwanted behavior, which is not completing the task. And that would make students less likely to complete their task again. So next will be the implication of the theory to the teaching practice, which should be discussed by Ms. Delacruz.
Good day. For the continuation of discussion about Module 5, let's talk about operant conditioning and its implication for teaching. This concept introduced by Rip Skinner. So it's not just theoretical, it introducing an adverse consequence. For example of it, instead of scolding a student for not submitting homework, praise those who do. For instance, thank you for submitting your work online. This encourages others to follow suit. And for the second implication for teaching, carefully select reinforcers for their potency. So meaning, not all words are motivating for all students. Teachers should consider individual preference when selecting
everyone. Our topic for today is neo-behaviorism of Edward Tolman and Albert Bandura. Neo-behaviorism builds on the foundational concept of behaviorism by integrating cognitive elements, focusing on the role of mental processes and understanding behavior. It emphasizes the goal-directed nature of learning and the importance of observation in acquiring new behaviors, making it a bridge between behaviorism and cognitive theories. The two proponents of neo-behaviorism, first is Edward Tolman. Tolman is a prominent psychologist, is best known for developing purposive behaviorism, which bridges behaviorist and cognitive psychology elements. Unlike traditional behaviorists, who focus purely on observable behaviors and external stimuli, Tolman argued that behavior is forceful, full, and goal-directed. Tolman's work challenged the strict stimulus-response frameworks of behaviorism and laid the groundwork for the cognitive revolution in psychology. His ideas showed that internal mental processes like planning and representation are essential for understanding learning and behavior. Next is Albert Bandura. Bandura was a renowned psychologist best known for his social learning theory, which emphasized the importance of observing, modeling, and imitating the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reactions of others. His work, Behavioral and Cognitive Psychology, highlighting how individuals learn from their social environment. Bandura's work demonstrated that learning is not purely a result of direct reinforcement, as behaviorists claim, but also involves cognitive and social factors. His famous Bobodal experiment showed how children imitated aggressive behaviors modeled by adults, emphasizing the power of observational learning in shaping behaviors. His theories have profound application in education, therapy, and media studies. So, next is key points of Tolman and Bandura's theory that will be discussed by Mr. Forman.
The continuation of our topic, the definition of neo-behaviorism. Behaviorism, the prediction and control of human behavior in which introspection and independent thinking play an initial part of its teaching method. Neo-behaviorism is a behavior cannot be full understand simplified in terms of observable stimuli and reactions. So, purposive behaviorism views learning as a purposeful and a goal-oriented process. Unlike traditional behaviorism, it posits that behavior cannot be fully understood by merely observing stimuli and response. Instead, intervening variables, cognitive process like expectations and representations, immediate behavior. The key points of neo-behaviorism, cognitive maps. Cognitive maps, these are mental representations on environment, allowing individuals to navigate efficiently towards a goal. For example, a student who forms a mental image of classroom layouts can locate resources without needing to explore repeatedly. Latent learning is learning that is not immediately observable in behavior but is retained until needed. For example, a student might silently learn a concept during a lecture but only demonstrate understanding during an exam. Next is intervening variables. Internal processes such as perceptions, needs, and expectations that influence behavior. These variables highlight that responses are not just automatic but are shaped by cognitive factors. Reinforcement is not initial. Reinforcement enhances learning performance but is not prerequisite for learning. For example, students may learn content through exploration or curiosity, even its absence of rewards. Bandora's social learning theory, observational learning by observation others' actions and consequence of those actions. For example, a child learns to solve a math problem by watching a teacher demonstrate the process. Meditational process learning is meditated by cognitive process occurring between stimulus and response. Attention, focusing on models, behavior, retention, remembering what was observed. Reproduction, physically replicating the behavior. Motivation, the desire to perform the behavior based on anticipated outcomes. Modeling and role models. Individuals imitate behaviors demonstrated by influential or relatable models. For example, students may emulate a teacher for a subject if they admire the teacher. Self-efficiency. Bandura emphasizes the importance of self-efficiency, the belief in one's ability to succeed. Positive reinforcement and supportive feedback build students' confidence in their abilities.
So here are some implications to teaching. First is teachers serve as a role models whose behaviors and attitude influence students. This emphasizes that students often observe and imitate their teachers' behaviors, attitudes, and reactions. Teachers set examples through their professionalism, patience, and enthusiasm, which can positively or negatively shape students' behaviors and attitudes. Second is incorporating group activities and modeling encourages collaborative learning. Social learning theory supports the idea that students learn from observing and interacting with peers. Group activities provide opportunities for students to model behaviors, share knowledge, and learn from one another in a collaborative environment. Third is building students' self-efficacy ensures they approach tasks with confidence and persistence. Self-efficacy, a concept from Bandura, is the belief in one's abilities to succeed. Teachers can nurture this by giving students positive feedback, manageable challenges, and opportunities to experience success which help them approach tasks with determination. Fourth is lessons should include practical demonstrations to connect observation and application. Observational learning is more effective when students can directly see how a concept is applied. Demonstrations provide a clear model for students to observe and replicate bridging theory and practice. Number 5 is teachers should design lessons with clear goals and guide student learning. Aligning with Tolman's purposive behaviorism, lessons should have clear objectives to provide students with directions and purpose, ensuring that learning is goal-oriented. Number 6, activities that encourage exploration and independent thinking help students from cognitive maps. Cognitive maps, a concept from Tolman, are mental representation of knowledge. Activities like problem solving and project-based learning allow students to actively explore and structure their understanding of concepts. And last is, lessons should provide opportunities for talent learning, recognizing that not all learning is immediately visible. Latent learning of Tolman's theory suggests that students may learn concepts without displaying
displaying immediate understanding or apprehension. Teachers